Philosophy has long sought refuge in the written word. It has trusted in the stability of the sentence, the rigor of the concept. And yet, what is thought, if not a force that exceeds its own formulation, a movement that both preserves and negates itself?
Thought is not a tame thing. It is wild, violent, ecstatic. It leaps, it burns, it devours.
It doesn't wait politely for peer review. It moves, it shifts, it dances, and sometimes it pulls the rug out from under you, leaving you wondering if your entire concept of reality was just a well-constructed illusion.
We are mistaken when we believe that ideas live only in argument. They seep into the texture of life, materializing in objects, in gestures, in the architectures of the everyday. The philosopher's task is not merely to construct theories, but to unearth the forgotten strata of meaning, to trace the dialectic of thought in its most fragile, transient forms.
Quine once asked, "How do we even know what words mean? Imagine you're on a desert island and some guy points at a rabbit and yells, 'Gavagai.' Does he mean rabbit? Or does he mean undetached rabbit parts? Or divine spirit of all rabbitness? You don't know. You can't know. And honestly, maybe neither does he. Words attempt to carve boundaries, to segment time into distinct moments. But true understanding is never given all at once. It accumulates, unfolds, thickens like duration itself.
It is not in the sharp definition of a concept, but in the living rhythm of its evolution, that meaning emerges.
We do not think in isolated propositions. We think as we see, as we touch, as we move through space. Thought is not merely in language. It is in the hand that writes, in the eyes that search, in the breath held between one idea and the next.
There are moments when knowledge ceases to explain and begins to illuminate. In these moments, thought is not a system, but a flash, an image that holds in its structure the shock of recognition. This is the moment in which philosophy ceases to be merely pedagogy and becomes art, not as decoration, but as a medium of interruption, of awakening. Art reminds us of what philosophy forgets, that meaning is not something we impose on the world, but something that emerges between us and the world.
It is not simply conceptual, it is embodied, woven into perception itself. To think is not only to analyze, but to see, to let meaning take shape before us, to recognize that thought is not separate from the world, but folded into it.
To think is to inscribe oneself into a history of images, of forms, of correspondences.
Philosophy has always done this, only it has refused to acknowledge it.
The question is not whether thought can be visualized, but whether it was ever anything but an attempt to capture the fleeting, to frame the ungraspable.
The limits of philosophy are the limits of its form. And yet, what if those limits were never fixed? The author of this channel never set out to find this path. He only wanted to play, to throw images together, to break frames, to see what happens when thought stops explaining and starts seeing. And somewhere in that collision, something happened. Somewhere in all that chaos, something clicked.
A factory of vision, of insight, a space where philosophy ceases to be just an argument and becomes an experience.
My videos in 7 minutes of philosophy of mind run on this exact fuel. No permission slips, no easy answers, just full-speed philosophy, tearing through assumptions, pushing thought to the edge of sight, where ideas don't just get explained, they get felt. If that sounds like your kind of thing, come along. Let's push thought to its limits and see what happens.